Hello and welcome to Who Wore It Better, where I review Raw and Smackdown back to back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And I guess it wouldn't hurt to ask and try and get on the bandwagon. So hey, folks at White Claw Hard Seltzer, could you hook a brother up with an endorsement deal? Thanks. The much-hyped and ballyhooed Raw reunion takes place in Tampa, Florida, home to many professional wrestlers throughout history, so it's pretty convenient. It means you don't have to fly that many guys in. John Cena opens the show. He pretty much runs down some of the big names that are going to be there tonight. The Usos interrupt. They want to bust some rhymes. The Doctor of Thugonomics himself. Cena drops a rhyme, and he also references the Usos' respective arrest records in recent months. The Usos introduce their dad, Rikishi. They're all about to dance when suddenly the Revival interrupts, and they bring out their corner man, Devon Dudley, sans Bubba Ray, who of course is working for Ring of Honor at the present time. We then go to a tag match as the Revival take on the Usos after the break, and I thought it was going to be a six-man match with all these guys coming in, but no, instead Rikishi is just going to be in the Usos corner, and Devon is going to be in the Revival's corner, and no John Cena to be found after that opening segment. He's gone the whole rest of the night. I can understand why Devon is in the Revival's corner, because, you know, the Dudleys were kind of an old-school tag team. I'm sure the Revival gets some inspiration from them. Also, I'm spitballing here. I'm betting you anything that Devon is a big mentor to the Revival in terms of teaching them the ways of tag team wrestling. I wouldn't be surprised if Devon was like their match producer for the most part. So kind of a cool thing to see them all together at ringside for this big momentous night on the Raw reunion. Obviously, you can't get one of the Brainbusters to be in their corner for different reasons right now. It would have been cool to see Jim Cornette get brought out for a one-time gig, managing the Revival for one night only. The Usos win after Dawson's distracted when Rikishi and Devon are in the outside talking mess. So the Usos win. The rivalry between these two continues, seemingly. We don't get a big dance-off at the end, which disappointed me. So before the last commercial break, we saw a quick backstage chat between Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart, and so then after the tag team match, we see more backstage scenery, this time with Alicia Fox talking to Dana Brooke. Then in walks former Divas champion Kaitlyn, who probably gets the weakest nostalgia pop of the night, I think because her appearance has changed so much since when she was in the company last, so people might forget about it. And then Tori Wilson comes in, Santino Marella shows up, and then Drew McIntyre appears, just shakes his head at all of them, and walks on. Another backstage scene, we see R-Truth and Carmella being interviewed. We see a clip of what happened over the weekend at the San Diego Comic-Con when the Hurricane and Drake Maverick tried to beat R-Truth for the 24/7 championship. Back in real time, in walks Drake's wife, Renee Michelle, and with that distraction, Drake actually shows up, rolls up R-Truth from behind, and wins the 24/7 championship. Then after all that chaos, the Godfather walks in next to Charlie Caruso and says that famous catchphrase of his, "It's time for everybody to get on board the..." He literally just lip syncs the word "Ho Train" and then lets the audience fill in the blank. I'm guessing they did that just because it's still PG, even though they're trying to attract the teen demographic with the increased use of swears. It feels like that would have been their quota. It would have been, okay, we said "Ho Train." That's the one naughty word we say in the course of the night to try and get the teen demographic, but that was not meant to be. But anyway, Godfather and Charlie are just dancing after they say that, and that's pretty much the whole thing. We got to get these legends in as fast as we can, folks. Up next, Drew McIntyre takes on Cedric Alexander in a rematch from last week. Drew hopes to get some revenge from the last time he tried getting revenge. However, we don't really get a proper match this time. Drew beats up Cedric on the outside of the ring before the bell even rings, hits him with the reverse Alabama slam on the ring apron. That's pretty much where it ends. Drew gets some of his heat back. Where do we go from here? Backstage, Drake Maverick is confronted by the Boogeyman. He falls backwards as he trips on a suitcase. Pat Patterson walks in, stomps on him a couple times, pins him with his foot, and is the new 24/7 champion, and it gets even better from there. Your next match sees the Viking Raiders take on former Raw Tag Team champs Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, with Christian doing commentary and Lillian Garcia doing the ring announcing. It's a big squiggity squash match, though I will give Hawkins props because I think his tights he's wearing on this night are a big tribute to Edge. Loved it. Backstage, there's a reunion party going down. We see some familiar faces from earlier in the night, and then we also see Jillian Hall and Eve Torres and Eric Bischoff as well, who tries to talk the Canelli into going to Smackdown. Speaking of the Canelli, we see Maria berating Mike in front of everybody at the party before she storms off. Ron Simmons shows up and grabs Jimmy Hart's megaphone and yells "damn" into it. I'm always curious how much they're paying Simmons for these quick appearances where he just shows up and says one word. In another backstage bit, Gerald fucking Briscoe is your new 24/7 champion. As soon as Patterson won the belt earlier, I'm like, okay, where's Briscoe? We gotta recreate the magic of the 24/7 championship. Sure enough, we see this. Apparently, Pat was taken down off camera. There's no no way he's taking a bump, and so he's just already down there. Briscoe's already beat him. He's like, yeah, I won the belt. Kelly shows up, hits him in the balls, pins him, and now she is the new 24/7 champion. So now it is canon. The 24/7 championship is an intergender championship. Samoa Joe shows up to cut a promo. He says that the reunion is a plague upon WWE. He rightfully points out it glorifies nostalgia. He runs down Rikishi and the Usos before Roman Reigns appears to defend his family's honor and the bloodline and all that. They has fight, and then Roman challenges Joe to a match. Joe balks, but Roman goads him into it. So we have a proper match after the commercial break. Very competitive affair. Roman Reigns ultimately wins. Miz TV time with special guest Seth Rollins. Seth spends the bulk of his time on the mic making fun of Paul Heyman's voice and making fun of Brock Lesnar. Says that Lesnar is a Seth Rollins wannabe, which I don't really see it, but okay, we'll just go along with it. Paul Heyman shows up, tries to talk some mess, but Seth threatens to beat him up. Heyman flees, and then Seth kind of invokes the spirit of James Ellsworth by saying Brock Lesnar is just a man, and any man can lose. This is kind of a wishy-washy promo. Back at the party, people are dancing to music nobody can hear. Sami Zayn shows up and gives another speech that derides the legends being used on TV. Maybe we should keep the real talk to a minimum on this show, since the whole point of the show is to glorify the legends. Rey Mysterio appears to defend their honor, then Kurt Angle steps in between them and tells them to has fight. In another backstage bit, Kelly celebrates her championship win with Candice Michelle, and then they pan over to see Melina talking to Naomi. It looks like they're just finishing making out, because as it pans over, they're like finishing a hug, as if like, were they not hearing in on Kelly and Candice's conversation the whole time? Like, what are they doing? Hugging the whole... That was really weird. Anyway, Melina reveals a referee shirt under her blouse, and so then Candice jumps Kelly. 3 count. Candice is your new 24/7 champion. She does a big slow twirl around. Alundra Blaze shows up and puts Candice in a submission hold. Candice taps out, and now Alundra Blaze is the new 24/7 champion. And then she has this really weird line, which at first time you hear it sounds like it was a botch, but then you understand why later. Well, it's still partly a botch, because she calls it the 24 championship and says, I won't be champion for very long. Like, huh? Next match is Sami Zayn versus Rey Mysterio with Jonathan Coachman on commentary. Sami tries to bail early on, then at the ramp he's cut off by Sergeant Slaughter, the Hurricane, Kurt Angle, and current Impact Wrestling star Rob Van Dam. You know, that famous foursome that everyone always associates with each other. Anyway, Sami gets back in the ring, eats a 619 and a frog splash. Rey wins. Yay, legends. And the best part about this is actually the backstage bit right afterward where the Street Profits are talking, and Dawkins is using eye drops, and Montez Ford asks, hey, are you skating with the pilots? Which I don't get that lingo. I tried looking it up, couldn't find the definition for that phrase. Then Dawkins says he was just hanging out with RVD, which I popped huge for. I could not believe they got away with that reference on air. So apparently it wasn't a botch when Alundra said backstage that she would not be the champion for long, because she shows up on stage with the 24/7 title. She threatens to throw it in the wastebasket like what she did with the Women's Championship many years ago on Nitro, when suddenly Ted DiBiase appears and buys the belt off her. So now DiBiase is the new 24/7 champion, which now sets the precedent. The title can change hands due to financial transaction. So that means that DiBiase can be retroactively considered a world champion, because when he bought the belt off Andre the Giant, they said you couldn't do that. Well, now it's canon. Now you can do that. In a rematch from Money in the Bank, AJ Styles takes on Seth Rollins with Jerry Lawler on commentary here. Early in the match, the OC surrounds Seth on the outside. Out come Triple H and Shawn Michaels DX to make the save. And so then the match continues. Seth teases the stop, but Anderson and Gallows interfere. Match is thrown out. We get a face-off between DX and the OC. Styles offers the two sweet, and Triple H and Shawn answer with a crotch chop. Then Road Dogg, X-Pac, and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, the outsiders, make their way to the ring. Nash and Hall are wearing their NWO gear, so it's kind of a weird hybrid of DX and NWO. It's a clique, essentially. Road Dogg gives a shout out to China, and then says, oh dang, we forgot about Billy, which I popped for. Then the OC back off. Seth Rollins steals Billy Gunn's line, says, if you're not down with that, we got 2 words for you. The clique hug and leaves Seth Rollins all by his lonesome, which creates this hilarious meme, and that's pretty much how the segment ends. Poor Seth. More 24/7 wackiness. This time in the garage, Ted DiBiase makes his way into the limo, closes the door. We hear a struggle going on, but we don't see him do anything because he's not taking any bumps tonight, folks. Drake Maverick emerges from the limo, the new 24/7 champion. The League of Jobbers chases him off screen. Then it's time for an address from the Hall of Famer Mick Foley. He's in the ring. Doesn't get very far, though, before Drake and the aforementioned League of Jobbers run through the ring area, and Foley's like, come to Papa. He wants that 24/7 championship. It's weird because this whole show is built upon like nostalgia, obviously, but in a weird showing of restraint right? They don't actually show you that much nostalgic stuff. Like the older stars are there in person, but they don't show you a lot of archival clips, except for this one time when Foley shows his clip of him winning the World Championship in 1999 on Raw. But a few seconds into the clip, it starts to deteriorate, the lights go out, they come back up, and Bray Wyatt as The Fiend shows up. Now here's the difference between, say, DX interacting with the OC and Mick Foley interacting with The Fiend, because at least Foley will take a dive and make The Fiend look good. The Fiend hits him with a mandible claw, Foley's own submission hold, and takes him down, which is very powerful, because like I think Bray should use the mandible claw regularly, along with Sister Abigail, have him use the mandible claw as well to make things more versatile. And it's a perfect submission for like a crazy character like The Fiend. But yeah, the fact that he's able to take down Foley here and make him look even more devilish, I think is a very powerful thing. Far better to build that character, a far better way to build that character up than what happened the previous bit with the OC and DX, for example. I had this idea Monday afternoon, like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if like the whole story was like one by one you see these legends like just taken down, like you see them like laid out, but you don't know who beat them up, and then finally at the end it's revealed it was Bray Wyatt the whole time. That would have been really cool. I don't do fantasy booking very much, but I thought that idea could have worked out. But no, him taking down Foley, just Foley by himself, I think that was a fine consolation. Once again, Raw feels the need to include 2 talk show segments in one episode. This time it's Moment of Bliss with special guest Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch. Not too many words are exchanged before Natalya interrupts. She's the #1 contender to Becky's championship at SummerSlam. Natalya, lectures Becky about respect. Becky says that her championship is the scalp of Natty's best friend, Ronda Rousey. They has fight. Alexa and Nikki Cross slowly back away as the fight goes on, which is a funny visual. Then after the break, Natalya is questioned further about it and says, Becky's been trying to rewrite history and that she is going to beat Becky at SummerSlam for the championship. It wasn't a bad confrontation, and some nice fire from Natalya here. Again, the fact that she has been suddenly thrown into being the #1 contender does still feel kind of out of left field, but at least now they're kind of like backfilling the angle here with like the personal drama between them. Back in the garage, Drake Maverick and his wife Renee are trying to escape in the same limousine that Ted DiBiase was in earlier. So what happened to him? Did he just like flicker away and disappear like a video game character? And then as they're getting into the limo, R-Truth rolls up. Drake wins back the championship, dives into the limo with Renee still inside, and the limo drives off. Man, I thought Mike and Maria Kanellis was the cuckold angle. This is a whole new spin. Braun Strowman strangely going back to his roots and squashing local talent here. It's so weird because this show is so light on regulars to begin with. So you've got all these people backstage just sitting around, and you're going to have Braun take on like small local jobber. Seems really weird. But the one high point of this whole match is like as they're talking about the name on commentary, somehow Graves breaks Cole on commentary. So Graves has to take over the rest of the bit before commercial break. So that was pretty funny. And that random squash match was the last match of the evening as we wrap things up with a toast to Monday Night Raw. All the names and the legends are on stage. Why is Alicia Fox up there with them? Because isn't she still a contracted wrestler? I mean, you could argue she's like a legend based on her tenure in the company alone. But anyway, Ric Flair is there, Hulk Hogan's there, and he cuts a bit of a promo and says, what you gonna do when the Raw reunion runs wild on you? They'll stand there for a little while while the music plays, kind of awkwardly. Then finally, Stone Cold Steve Austin shows up to the biggest pop of the night. He's like chugging IPAs and all over his face. That's like the wrong beer I would chug or like throw it in my face like Austin does. Austin, though, has a very good speech. Like his whole closing speech is about the family and the brotherhood and the sisterhood of professional wrestling, all the sacrifices the wrestlers have made to get to where they are. And he has some funny anecdotes about his run-ins with some of the names of the hotel the night before. He briefly mentioned that he and Gerald Briscoe might have committed crimes in South Africa. Someone should get on that. And then we have a big old toast at the end of the night, and that's how it ends. Probably the strongest moment of the entire theme of the night, the nostalgia theme. This here with Austin talking about the sacrifices of the wrestlers and how they're all family and stuff. That was a really cool speech and a really cool way to close the show. Once again, Shane McMahon opens up SmackDown. The commentary team tonight is very different from what it usually is. Byron Saxton is off for the week after the unfortunate passing of his father. Corey Graves is apparently on a movie set, and so you've got Tom Phillips, Xavier Woods, and Big E are on commentary for the first half of the show, and David Otunga. Shane says he accepts Kevin Owens' challenge to a match at SummerSlam. He brings up that Kevin has said that Kevin will quit if he loses to Shane at SummerSlam, and Shane says he wants that in writing. He also pulls up a clip from Raw about a year ago where Kevin lost a match and then he got on the microphone and said, "I quit," and he leaves. I think that quitting lasted maybe 2 weeks tops, if I remember correctly. So when Kevin Owens interrupts and says, "I'm a much different person than that man from a year ago." And so Shane makes a match between Kevin and Roman Reigns for later in the night. Then after that, backstage, Shane sees Elias and Drew McIntyre, and he makes Elias the guest timekeeper, Drew the guest referee, and Shane himself is going to be the guest ring announcer for that match. It's Vince and the Stooges all over again. Your first match of the night sees Shinsuke Nakamura taking on Apollo Crews in non-title action. Really good match here. I really enjoyed this one. Ultimately, Shinsuke wins with the Kinshasa. Then after the match, he does a post-match beatdown on Apollo, hits the Kinshasa again on the outside. As he's walking away, you hear Xavier on the commentary go, "Where are your friends, Apollo? Where are your friends?" Backstage, Mandy Rose drops a surprise on Sonya Deville and says that they have a match next week with the Iconics. And Sonya says, "So wait, are you saying we have a women's tag team title match?" And then Mandy goes, "Yes, and if we win, we deserve a match for the women's tag team championships." So which is it? Is it a title match next week or not? Also, where the hell are the Kabuki Warriors? We had a backstage promo by Ali. He says he's rewriting his story and he refuses to let the injury that took him out of the Elimination Chamber match earlier this year define him. So wait a minute, is he still fighting Shinsuke for the IC title down the road or what? It's time for another edition of Miz TV with special guest Shawn Michaels. As he makes his entrance, Big E and Xavier on commentary sing along with Shawn's theme, which is pretty awesome. Shawn puts over Seth Rollins a bit in the interview. Dolph Ziggler cuts them off. And Dolph trashes Shawn for pretty much undoing his retirement and coming out of retirement in that match with the Brothers of Destruction last year for Crown Jewel. Called it an embarrassment. And Shawn, with like the burn of the millennium, goes, "You know what? That was an embarrassment, that match was. But you know what's even more embarrassing? After working for so many years and still coming off like a second-rate Shawn Michaels wannabe in Dolph Ziggler. What a burn." Ziggler yells some more before The Miz cuts him off and tells him to do something about it. We actually get a "do something" chant from the crowd. Ultimately, Dolph takes a swing at Shawn, who ducks. So Dolph hits The Miz, Shawn hits Dolph hits Shawn with a super kick and then leaves, and that's pretty much that. At this point, I'm far more interested in a match between Shawn and Dolph than I am Dolph and The Miz, but I'm pretty sure that's where they're going with this, is more Dolph and Miz action here, and maybe they'll involve Shawn now since he's been physically involved here. Maybe this will set something up down the line for a Dolph-Shawn match. I'd be open to that, absolutely. I mean, far more than what he did at Crown Jewel, but I think it's interesting. I enjoyed the segment overall. I think it's cool they brought up the Crown Jewel stuff, like they're not trying to sweep it under the rug necessarily. The parallels between Dolph and Shawn, like I said, the way they set it up, it makes me more interested in that kind of match than what we got a taste of last week. Charlotte Flair takes on Ember Moon up next, and only seconds into the match, Bayley makes her introduction and totally interrupts the proceedings. In the distraction, Ember rolls Charlotte up to win the matchup, so kind of makes Charlotte look like a chump after having main evented WrestleMania and having beat Asuka for the Women's Championship in this really intense match. She loses in like record time to Ember Moon. Also, the women's match is once again the shortest match on the card of the night on SmackDown by miles. Anyway, after the match, Ember throws Bayley into the ring. Bayley gets taken out by Charlotte. Ember hits both Charlotte and Bayley with the Eclipse, so she stands like super tall, looks really good at the end of this segment here, but it came at the expense of Charlotte, which I think is kind of weird. Xavier and Big E are done doing commentary for the night, and they're replaced by Michael Cole as Kofi Kingston makes his way out to pick his SummerSlam opponent. He calls out Randy Orton, and the Viper responds. Kofi brings up their history going way back to about a decade ago, and he accuses Orton of using his influence to hold Kofi down all those years ago. Yet despite all that, Kofi has climbed to the top and is the new champion. And so Orton says, "Yeah, I did use my influence to hold you down, but I did it for your own good, Kofi, because you weren't ready. You didn't deserve it then, and you don't deserve it now." Orton tells Kofi he didn't have to do a fake Jamaican accent, throw pancakes, or shake his ass to get over, which is a great line. He also says that he's the one responsible for Kofi being champion in the first place because he's the one who injured Ali, allowing Kofi to take his place. So Kofi officially makes the challenge, Orton officially accepts, and we are on. I'm very excited for this one because I'm sure they're going to touch on this more as the weeks go on. But I mean, these two do have a history. It didn't feel like that long ago when Orton was yelling at Kofi, "Stupid, stupid, stupid," in the middle of the match. And now we've come full circle. Now Kofi's in the main event and Randy's there too. And so these guys are reconvening for the title. It's a pretty strong interview segment too. Then Samoa Joe comes out and we have our next match as Kofi takes on Samoa Joe in non-title action. It's a good match until Orton jumps in the ring and tries to RKO Kofi with no success. The match is thrown out. Orton does hit Joe with the RKO, and then Kofi hits Orton with Trouble in Paradise. So still looking tall as he gets ready for his triple threat match for the title at Smackville. Finn Balor's being interviewed. He challenges Bray Wyatt to a match at SummerSlam, and Bray responds from the Firefly Funhouse. So we get kid show version Bray on the screen, along with Ramblin' Rabbit and Mercy the Buzzard. And he says the Fiend accepts Finn's challenge, and then we get some more spooky imagery as we see the Fiend. He says, "Let me in." I love the idea of getting kind of dual Bray Wyatt, not exclusively the Fiend all the time, but he can kind of jump back and forth between, kid show Bray and then the Fiend when the plot requires it. I really am excited to see them try and play with this duality, this concept of a multiple personality Bray Wyatt. Backstage, Charlotte is hopping mad over what happened earlier, and she says she's irate that, she's not even on the card at SummerSlam right now. She says she is going to be at SummerSlam and have a match with an opponent who's better than Ember Moon. I wonder who that could be. Main event time as Roman Reigns takes on Kevin Owens with Shane McMahon, Elias, and Drew McIntyre in their respective side jobs. Things break down fairly quickly when the good guys beat up the bad guys. The numbers game catches up to them, but ultimately Roman and Kevin stand tall. Shane eats a Superman punch and 2 straight stunners to end the show. I think Shane having gotten beat up the last few weeks is really refreshing, because I think what made the evil Mr. McMahon character work so well was that he would get his licks in on Austin, for example, and say, well, I'm going to put you in these insurmountable things. And ultimately, Vince would always allow himself to get beat up, to show ass, as the term goes. He would frequently get humiliated by Austin, fairly often. Sometimes he would get the last laugh, but he always got beat up to send the fans home happy at the end. And I think we're finally seeing some more of that with Shane McMahon getting beat up by Kevin Owens for the last several weeks. It is an old thing. It's sometimes what's old is new again, and but I think in this case it's working. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, Raw or Smackdown. And this week, I'm giving the nod to Smackdown. Now, Raw was just jam-packed with nostalgia, which is good in small doses, as it was on Monday, but, I think it came at the expense of all the other current storylines going on here, while putting the past on a pedestal, which I've always railed against. I doubt that this show would convince lapsed fans or non-wrestling fans to really get into the product. I think we maybe got a total of 3 actual storylines, not even advanced, but just brought up and reminded of. Compared to Raw 25, though, I think it's a better nostalgia show than Raw 25 was, because Raw 25 was trying to find that balance between nostalgia show and also, oh yeah, it's go home week for the Royal Rumble, we better plug that. So that was a really tough balance, and they failed at that. So with the stakes not as high, I think Raw Reunion did a better job at that. So yeah, fun nostalgia show on its own, but it really came at the expense of the rest of the storylines for Raw. Meanwhile, SmackDown got to be its regular self this week, which I think did a service to them. It was a stronger show for it. Not everything was perfect, but we did get a lot more progression towards SummerSlam, which was the big difference. There was almost no storyline progression to SummerSlam on Monday Night Raw compared to SmackDown. They tried some new things in terms of promos and the announce team shakeup, and went in interesting directions with promos. The overall SmackDown was a much stronger show in a lot of respects. I mean, across both shows, the wrestling was take it or leave it. I mean, SmackDown, to my mind, immediately had the better matchup with, Shinsuke and Apollo Crews, for example. AJ versus Seth was a great match on paper, but ultimately went nowhere, so that kind of soured on me. Let me know what you thought about Raw and SmackDown this week in the comments section below, and be sure to vote which show you thought was better by going to the iCard in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.